All right, the January 24th, 2022 meeting of the West Springfield Zoning Board of Appeals is hereby called to order at 7 p.m. In accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, I must announce that anyone intending to tape the meeting must identify themselves to the clerk and provide his or her name and address for the record. And we inform those present that any document that is to be considered or discussed must be made part of the record of the meeting, and the original or copy must be submitted to the committee before there will be any discussion regarding said document. Documents include photos, plans, drawings, computer printouts and simulations, video presentations, and the like, as well as letters and written materials. Tonight's first public hearing is Gale Toyota Incorporated, appeal of the building commissioner. The applicant seeks to appeal the determination that the use of the property located at 8 Chestnut Street for the purposes of purchasing used motor vehicles is a violation of the zoning ordinance. The building commissioner's determination finds that the establishments for the sale of used motor vehicles and trailers are permitted in the Business B zoning district only and require a special permit with a site plan review. The subject property is located in the Business A zoning district. Is there somebody here tonight to present for the petitioner?
Certainly. Good evening, Board.
Just state your name and address for the record, please.
It's just about to. Ryan O'Hara of Bacon Wilson on behalf of the applicant, Gale Toyota. My business address is 57 Center Street, Northampton, Massachusetts. So I think the most critical thing from the applicant's perspective is a point we can have some agreement, which is that we totally agree with the building inspector that selling used automobiles in the Business A district, where this property is, would be prohibited by the town's bylaws, specifically, I believe it's section 310.2. Equally critical is the fact that there will be no sales of autos at my client's space. And just as critical as those first 2 points, there's no actual use that's been commenced as of yet. My client has leased a space for the purpose of one business, which is buying used automobiles. That business is going to require, not yet obtained, but something my client is going to seek through the proper processes, a Class 2 license from the License Commission. And what the building commissioner, the inspector in the enforcement letter indicates is essentially that because a Class 2 license in the abstract is for the sale and purchase of automobiles, then that necessarily means there's going to be some sort of illegal use at this property in the Business A district. But that misstates both how zoning works and what the Class 2 license really does. Because Class 2 licenses can be conditioned, and in this case, my client, given the business plans, will certainly agree to and perhaps even seek affirmatively a condition on the Class 2 license that no sales are to occur under that license. A Class 2 license can be limited to just purchases of automobiles. And when you get into purchases of automobiles and how that's handled under the West Springfield zoning bylaw, or more importantly, the specifics of my client's business plan and how it's going to be handled, which is that this office space, because that's really what it is going to be staffed with people who are going to handle administrative aspects of purchases by the buy center and provide a place for people who are not the business selling its cars to people who are selling their automobiles to the business. So the business is a purchaser there to meet with representatives of the businesses to discuss that deal. There is not going to be on-site storage of these vehicles. There's not going to be, at the risk of beating a dead horse, any sales of vehicles from this business once it's actually up and running and in use to individuals. Beyond a Class 2 license, what this business is going to need to get and will be applying for is site plan review. Because what is allowed in the Business A district, which squarely fits this use, is all other sorts of commercial office uses. And that's really what the use here is going to be, commercial office use. What the building inspector's decision was that this violated an ordinance provision that prohibits the sale of used cars was just plainly wrong. And under Massachusetts law, it is the building inspector's burden to prove that there's been some sort of violation. What you're not going to hear tonight is any proof that a single car sale whatsoever happened at that location, or really that any actual use, aside from a sign going up saying we buy cars, happened. On those facts, there is no violation of the town's zoning ordinance prohibiting sales of used autos in the Business A district. That was an incorrect zoning enforcement application, and we'd ask the board to overturn it. And I'm happy to address specific questions the board may have or specific points of the argument, but it really is a pretty cut and dry case of interpreting the plain language of that bylaw, which prohibits sales, and applying it to the facts here where no sales have or are going to occur.
Any questions from the board to Ryan?
One question I have is, I go to sell my car to you. Where am I dropping the car off? And if it's there, how long is it going to stay there?
So it would be possibly there, depending on your convenience. It might be at a different location. It's going to stay there a very limited amount of time. The principal of Gale Toyota, Mr. Michael Green, couldn't be here this evening. It's his child's 2nd birthday. But I did speak to him just before the meeting, and I asked him that exact question because I think it's a salient concern, even though really it doesn't have anything to do whether autos are being sold at that property, which is what the enforcement action was really based on. But the quick answer to the question is, as fast as possible, they're going to be out of there, because one of two things is happening in that scenario. Either my client is then selling it at a different location to a wholesaler, providing it to a wholesaler, and in that circumstance, they need to go get it to that wholesaler as quick as possible. They want it gone. Likewise, they're either buying it, my client, for their own lot, in which case they want to go get it to their own lot at a business at a totally different location where it then may be sold. But no sales, period, in terms of use are happening at this property.
But aren't I selling you the car? Isn't that a sales?
What the zoning ordinance applies to is the use of the property owners or the people that have it. So it's a sale in the same sense that you could say when you go buy groceries, there's a, no, that's a bad example. That's the reverse situation. I'm trying to think of another scenario where it's a vendor. I mean, that was the same sense in saying if there's a used record store, which is another bad example because they're probably selling to on site.
Correct.
But if you were to take your records to them and they're just buying it and that's all they did, in a meaningful zoning or use sense, that wouldn't be the property owner making use of the property for the sale of records. And I know that that's a highly technical distinction, but I think it's a really significant one. What the town is able to regulate through zoning, just as a general principle, is the use of the properties by the people that are doing it. And here, what's been prohibited in the Business A district is the sale by those property owners of used automobiles. That's a different thing entirely from only purchases from the public happening on site. And again, just as a practical concern, so for instance, how long will it sit at the property when they buy it? That's something that can and will be addressed if it's a real concern through site plan review, which my client acknowledges it will need to go through before it can actually operate at this property in any way. Same with in the Class 2 licensure. Conditions can be attached there by the license condition. If that's a real concern based on the actual specific layout of the property or whatever may be the case, that can be addressed in 2 different licensing procedures. But what it doesn't change, the fact that that's an abstract concern, is that where no sale of a car has ever happened at this property, a cease and desist order was issued.
Any of you others have questions? All right. Ryan, I'd like to ask about their website, crazyjcars.com. It clearly states on their homepage or on their about page, because we buy cars like crazy, we also have a lot of cars to choose from when you want to buy a vehicle. And it states their 2 locations, their 2 buy center locations. One is in Enfield on Palumba Drive. The other buy center is of West Springfield at 8 Chestnut Street.
Right.
That clearly indicates an intent to sell.
No. What that's saying.
They also, and one more thing, they also have 12 cars listed for sale at present.
That's correct, but what that doesn't change is the proposed use of the property, which is what matters. And when it comes to the use of this property, you're right. That's an address for a buy center. That's where one of 2 locations where you will be able, as a consumer, as a person out there, to go sell your car to Gale Toyota, which will buy it. But what's not going to be happening in there is any sort of actual use, nor has any actual use happened there where a car's been sold there. And it's not going to be. So that's, businesses have, just as a general proposition, different locations where different things happen. To use a really easy example, McDonald's is a giant corporation, right? They don't have management direction decisions being made at non-franchise, directly controlled McDonald's, the actual points of sale. Those decisions are being made in an office somewhere. Those are two different uses. You don't analyze in whatever city the office building's happening, whether in the district the office building is, because it's McDonald's, retail sales of food are authorized. What would happen in that case is you'd look at, is this office use, the actual use that's here, allowed? And that's the same for the restaurant. That's the same for this business structure, even though it's a different thing. And the only use, real use, that's going to be happening in West Springfield is operating in an office to run paperwork for purchasing cars, to meet people who are selling their cars there, and to have a drop-off location where they can put their car. It's going to get ferried away somewhere else for whatever the next stage is. But that's it. None of those dozens of cars they have listed are ever going to be available for sale in West Springfield. Nor has, to this point, a single car been available for sale in West Springfield.
Okay.
Ryan, what are they expecting for daily averages?
I don't think that those figures aren't available to me right now, and I don't think that they've necessarily run those in that detail. Certainly, again, that's something that is properly going to be addressed if there's some sort of traffic concern or other impact, real impact zoning concern on site plan review. It's exactly the sort of thing that site plan review is meant to address. But what it, again, at the risk of overstating it, doesn't change the fact that no sales have occurred, and that's what was cited here.
Joe?
I guess my, my concern is a little bit of the smoke and mirrors. I mean, McDonald's has clearly separated their business offices from their fast food chains. I mean, people aren't going there bringing a sack of potatoes to sell, to get purchased for fries. They're doing that either in a distribution center or at Riverdale. So, I mean, to me, you have people coming there that are going to be selling their cars to Gale Toyota, but they're not going to do the other end. So they're going to be shipping it to a wholesaler. So to me, it sounds like they're doing it. It's just not as public or advertised by getting the cars dropped off in one spot, shipped to another spot.
So, hearing your question, I think there's a couple things that kind of allay that concern. One is the fact that any car buying activity is going to require Class 2 licensure, which could be conditioned. The last thing my client wants to do, once they get a Class 2 license, is lose it and not be able to run this business at all. And presumably, whether it's sales of automobiles in violation of the town's ordinance or in violation of some condition on their license, that's going to be fully enforceable if any sale was to ever happen there. And then something that allays it from just a practical perspective is even in the current business model, somebody walks into Gale Toyota at the existing location and says, hey, I want to sell you my car and I'm going to buy something here today. They don't operate it as like a direct seamless transaction where it's a trade-in. That person who wants to sell the car gets directed to the buy center division of the business. Separate transaction, and if they're buying a car, they're buying a car. But they're not intertwined, even in the existing business model, at one location. So that's not something that, as a practical matter, is going to happen here. The only person that really would be at risk from it, if they were to try to stupidly sell a car from a location where it's clearly prohibited under zoning, would be them.
If there's no further questions for Ryan, I'd like to have the building inspector address us, please.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Jay Stoop, Building Commissioner. The way this came about was I was out doing inspections one day, traveling on Westfield Street. I noticed two new signs installed on the building at 8-16 Chestnut Street, one on the south side of the building, one on the west side of the building. I pulled in, I knew there was no permits for those signs because I would have recognized that. It said, "We buy cars." Looked in the window, the door was locked. The office was fully furnished. Nobody was around, door locked. Went back to the office. Tried to look up on the website to try to get a phone number of somebody. They had a website that said the office in West Springfield was open. They listed a manager for the West Springfield office with a name and a phone number. I tried calling that number, couldn't get a hold of anybody. The only indication to me that they were not operating was a locked door at that location. So I issued a cease and desist order because I knew it wasn't allowed by zoning, and that's why that order was issued. And I did issue a violation letter for the signs, which they did take down, and currently there's no signs up, and they haven't operated as of yet.
Any questions for Jay from the board?
A couple questions, Jay. So, assuming they do what they say they're gonna do, I mean, how can you even enforce it? I mean, how would you be able to track it, I guess? Or can you?
Other than watching the internet and see what they're advertising. There's other issues too, as far as storage of unregistered vehicles. Our ordinance says that you have to have a license to sell unregistered vehicles in order to store unregistered vehicles on the property. If they don't have a license to sell, that'd be the other issue. If somebody drops off a car that they just sold, they take the plates off of it, now we have an unregistered vehicle there. I guess other than monitoring what they're trying to do, I don't know. That's another location where, I mean, this will be addressed as site plan review, but very limited parking there. I mean, we've had issues historically with the ice cream shop on the end and excessive parking in that lot, whereas I don't know how many vehicles they're gonna store in that lot. I mean, our ordinance says if it's just an office, Allison could correct me, I think it's 1 space per 300 square feet, 1 space for every 300 feet of office space. It's not a very big office, so parking would be limited for that space. But these are things to consider under site plan review, not for this board to determine.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I have none.
I'd like to also note that in the zoning ordinances, under section 300, I think it's 5.0, is it 5.0? 5.2. Yeah, where it says that if the use is not listed under the table of uses, if that list isn't used, it should be considered prohibited. So the use of, the sale of used cars is listed on that list, but not the buying of used cars. So it's not even listed on the chart of accounts or chart that says, you know, prohibited or allowed uses. So if it's not listed, it should be prohibited.
Any further questions? All right, Jay, thank you. Is there anybody from the audience that would like to address the board this evening? Just come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, please.
Jane Barrientos from 33 Cooper. We're behind that residence or that business area.
Okay.
I appreciate that the town is watching this kind of thing because this is a very dense neighborhood and parking is at a premium already. And there's already, afternoons are tough at about 3:45 when Mitnig School gets out. There's a lot of people in that street. And, you know, the comment about lack of parking there, a lot of the businesses that have in the past used that area have ended up with some cars on the street. I know it happens on Cooper too. And I just wanted to know if is there a way for the residents in that area to see the site plan review when it happens? Because it really will affect us. Even though we're on the opposite street, we were already having pretty bad problems there that have affected the whole area.
Yeah, you would definitely be able to see the site plan review because that has to go through the planning board. Their meetings are public.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Is there anybody else from the audience that would like to address the board before I close this public hearing? All right, I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we'll discuss this amongst ourselves. Our mics are on. We'll be back with you momentarily. I kind of feel the same way, Joe, that it's like an evolution of the car sale business. It's just like it's no longer dealerships, it's Carvana, it's slightly virtual. And this is pretty strong. It's right off their website. It's just like, it's a small parcel, and, did the owner do his due diligence before entering into a lease agreement? I'm not inclined to think so.
Yeah.
I'm not particularly in support of this because I think it kind of opens Pandora's box, and it makes it very hard to regulate, and it's a prohibited use, period.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I don't see, that might be the wave of the future. I probably would have gone about it differently, but I don't see how the building commissioner was in violation of turning it down, or, it's pretty black and white to me at the moment.
Mike?
Yeah, I think the use of the word sale versus purchase overlaps quite a bit here, as you were kind of alluding to, Andy, where you're going in to sell the vehicle to a purchaser.
It's like virtually semantics.
Yeah, so that's tough, where our guidelines and uses, as Jay stated, if it's not in the use, it's excluded, so it's a tough avenue.
Andy?
I tend to agree, and the fact that we don't know how many cars would be coming and going, I realize it'd be site plan review, but how long are they gonna stay? And as the building inspector noted, you sell a car, if I were to sell the car there, first thing I do if I'm dropping it off there is pull the plates. So how many cars are gonna be sitting there unregistered?
And for how long?
Correct.
Then I'm going to make a motion that the zoning board of appeals uphold the building inspector's decision and letter of November 9th to buy cars. Is there a second?
I second.
I'll do a voice vote. Andy?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
And on Reed votes yes as well. Sorry.
Thank you all for your time.
Is there any other agenda items or whatever?
Just the minutes.
Just, oh, yes. Everybody have an opportunity to read those?
Yes.
Or is there a motion for approval of the minutes from the last meeting?
I make a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, on that note, I will close
Motion
the
to adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
All
Aye.
those in favor?
I.
Aye. All right, we're all set. Thank you.